This tutorial is going to lead you through the process of converting your still images into final stop motion animation using Photoshop as the software. Photoshop has a whole motion section, which we'll get into shortly. Before you get into Photoshop, what you want to do is separate your sequences into separate folders. So for instance, in this case, I have an image that goes to 3315. Well, I have 3316 somewhere else. I don't want that to be considered part of the sequence, so by putting them into subfolders, it just makes it easy for Photoshop to recognize when to stop. So I'm going to do this one as the example. Basically what you want to do is make sure that your images are numbered sequentially. If they're not, then you're going to need to rename your files using something like Bridge or some other tool. You can optionally also size your images down if they've been shot at high resolution. You can see that these have been shot at 2464 by 1632. That's higher than the resolution we need, but not so high that it's going to slow the system down. If you have really high resolution images, you probably want to size them down to somewhere around the size that you plan on going out. We're going to go out to a standard HD definition, so these are about the right size. The aspect ratio is different, but I'll show you how we'll deal with that in a minute. So in order to get started here, go to Photoshop, File, New. I'm going to set my size to 1920 by 1080. That's the standard HD resolution, along with 1280 by 720. Those are the two standard HD resolutions. They're both 16 by 9. They work on Vimeo, YouTube, all HD televisions, that sort of thing. And that's why I'm going to go out 16 by 9, despite the fact that we shot this with a still camera which shot 4:3 aspect ratio. So I'm going to set 1920 1080. I'm going to be RGB and say OK. Now, before I get into actually doing anything with my footage, I'm going to do a couple things to set up Photoshop. The first one is Window, Workspace, Motion. So just set that as your workspace, and you'll get your timeline added in down here, and you'll be able to start messing around with all this, the frame rate and all that kind of business. All right, so I'm going to do Create Video Timeline, and that will allow us to then change some key things like what speed is this playing back. Now with stop motion animation, typically what you're going to do is, I'm just going to set timeline frame rate here. It's under this flyout if you didn't see that. So typically you're going to be doing around 12 frames per second. The default for Photoshop is to bring it in at 30 frames per second, which is an NTSC video frame rate. You certainly don't need to take that many pictures for stop motion. In some cases you'll want to be lower than 12 frames per second is good to get nice smooth motion. You can go lower than that and still make it look pretty good. This example that we did, we shot really coarse, and so I'll need to lower this again so that I get about the right speed. If you go with 10 frames per second and you shot it really coarse, then things are just going to go by really quickly. So I'm going to set this down to 6 frames per second because we just didn't shoot that many frames for this, and so this will make it play back at about the right speed. Even though it'll be choppy, it'll play back at the right speed, which is more important. Say OK here. By setting that first, what it does is it sets all of the footage that you bring in to use that frame rate if it doesn't have its own frame rate already. So in order to grab some footage, I'll do Layer, Video Layers, New Video Layer from File. I'm just going to select only the first image. Don't select all the images, just one image. Image sequence is on by default. Just click Open. It will pull that in as a movie. As you'll see here, it has this little icon indicating that this is a movie. This will already play back. It's just it's not going to play back and look very good, so I'll just play it. So you can get a sense of what happens. We're seeing a very cropped view, and it's hard to see exactly what's going on here. So I'm going to go ahead and pull this back. We don't even need this other layer, so I'm going to just get rid of that, and when I do, I just press delete. You can also hit the trash can. It crops this down to only the length of this clip, which is what I want in this case. So this wasn't very clear, so I'll just do this again so you can see it. If I add another layer here, this same layer stack that you're used to looking at in Photoshop is just also available over here, and it has additional controls for animation here. But I don't need a second layer at this point, so I'll just go ahead and delete that. I just have the single animation or video layer that we brought in here. So one thing is, again, if I'm just going to come out here, I'm just going to size back, and you can actually see how large that image is. I'm going to press right there. So now you can see that's actually what the frame is of the image. So we're actually missing the edge and then the bottom. We expect to lose a little bit on top and bottom because the aspect ratio difference, but I want to size this down. So to do that, I'm going to press Control T, that's free transform, and you get this little pop-up saying if you want to do this to a video layer, it has to become a smart object. It's an automatic thing. You just press convert and it does it. So notice over here this no longer has that video icon, it has the smart object icon. I'll show you what that means in just a minute. But I'm just going to hold Shift and drag this down to size it so it fits width. And you can see that automatically we sort of get a better framing of what we had shot initially. So now I'll play that back and you can get a sense of how this works. Okay, so something like that. And this actually may be a little on the slow side. We maybe could be, looks like we've got somebody's hand in there. So we could actually get away with doing this maybe at 8 frames a second or something like that. But this is fine for a demo. So what I want to do now is I want more of the bottom to be in when the Pac-Man and Ghost are along the bottom, and then probably more of the top as it's on the top. So in order to do that, you just click this little fold out right here, and this will give you the ability to key these different elements. So I'm gonna hold the Shift key. I just have the Move tool selected. Shift key, click and drag up. So I'm gonna frame that just so I can see a little bit more Pac-Man and the Ghost along the bottom. I'm gonna play this back to about here, and I want it to stay about that framing until around here, and then I want it to start going up. So I'm gonna click the stopwatch here, and that will add a key. This little diamond indicates that it's keyed. That means it's gonna hold this position at this point in time. I'll go forward to when Pac-Man's at the top, and I'm just gonna, again, I still just have the Move tool selected, hold Shift, and drag down, and that'll allow me to reframe that so that now that's the top of my frame. And it adds a new keyframe, and it'll actually animate between those. You'll see the whole board moving. So we're just keying in sort of a camera move into this to accommodate a different aspect ratio. Okay, and then at this point we probably want to already be back down to the bottom, so I'm going to go ahead and move that back up here. Don't pull too far, something like that, and that automatically keys again, and this is what we get as a result. Alright, so you get the idea. It basically works fine. Now just to add some simple audio to finish this off, on the audio track, click here, choose Add Audio. I'm going to go ahead and add a few of these. We'll do the Waka Waka. Alright, and that's just going to sound like this. Alright, and then I'll just add that in a few times. So I'll just duplicate that, select them both, duplicate it, select all 4, duplicate it. That way that goes along the whole audio track, or the whole visual track now. I'm going to go ahead and click this again and add a new track. And on this track I'm going to find the place where eats the ghost here, and I'm going to go ahead and add audio to that. Which again, I can just click Add Audio here, and then Pac-Man eating a ghost right there. Drag, whoops. See that they're both selected initially, so I just deselect that with the Control, and there. So now this is what we'll have. Okay, so something like that. I think that we need to stop the Waka Wakas over here, so I'll just select those and press Delete, and then I'll find my Pac-Man getting eaten sound, and you can click the plus down here instead. Just an alternative. So I'll make Pac-Man dead here, and just shift that down to here, and that will give us our complete movie. Okay, so, and you can of course add, another layer here that, whoops, that goes behind this one, and this would just cut to from whatever was going on here to this this one here, and this is just a standard Photoshop document. So if I fill that with black and I put a Pac-Man in it and say you're dead or whatever, then that will just show up there. So it's just standard Photoshop. So just use that, use these layers and make whatever you want. And that's basically it for this thing. The two things that I just want to show you very briefly. If you need to change the frame rate after the fact, you can again come over here, set the timeline frame rate, and change that to, say for instance, 8 frames per second. But that doesn't change the clip. The clip is still playing back at 6 frames per second. Now I just have the overall movie playing back at 8 frames per second. If I want to change the movie, I actually have to go into this smart object. I just want to make sure that you see how to do that. So if I double click, it'll pull up the smart object. That's the .psb here. So you can see this is just the original movie. It's just embedded into a smart object. In order to change that, it's layer, video layer, and then interpret footage. In the interpret footage dialog, just change that to whatever frame rate you wanted it to be. Let's say 8 frames per second. You can see that actually shortens the total amount of time. You have to press save in order for those effects to be to show up over here. So now you can see how much shorter that is. So this is all ending by here, which means our sounds are going to be off in timing. So I'll try to find the place where Pac-Man's eating the ghost right there. And then at this point, Pac-Man is being eaten himself. All right, so there we go. Pull that down like this, which means that our panning is also going to be incorrect. We want this to start panning probably around here-ish, maybe 1 frame prior. So adjusting timing after the fact generally means that you have to go back and make all sorts of adjustments to the rest of your timing, which is what I'm doing here. Okay, so that basically will do it, and I'll just play this back at 8 frames per second. All right, so obviously too many waka wakas. Knock those guys back here. I'll crop this one down so it just cuts off as soon as that dead sound happens. That's it. So that's the whole movie. I would, refine the frames and that sort of stuff, but that's the basic process. In order to get it out of Photoshop as a movie, you just do File, Export, Export, and then Render Video. So when you render this out, I'm going to send this to the desktop so I can find it quickly. You typically want to use H.264 as your video compression, and this is a general format that is set up, and the presets are generally really good coming out of Adobe products these days. So use the preset of high quality. If you want to size it down, but it basically pulls all the information from the document, and it should just basically work for you. So I'm going to go ahead and click Render. That should output to my desktop. Should be a pretty fast process, but I'll speed this up. Oh, I didn't even have to speed it up. There we go. All right, so I'll just go to the desktop here, and that should give me my final movie. Okay, so that's it. That's the whole process. I hope that helps.